Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. Thank you for joining me in this session titled Consulting Mindset during the PM72 Summit presented by Jexo. In the next 20-25 minutes, we are going to talk about, as the topic says, consulting and what consultants do. If you aspire to become one, what do you need to do to get started? And if you're already a consultant, how can you improve yourself? Hopefully, I'm able to tell you some things from my experience that will help you in your career journey. Please reach out to me during the after party if you have any specific thoughts, if you want to share comments, or if you want to have general conversation about consulting. Before we start talking about consulting, let me give you a quick introduction about myself. My name is Sajid Nair. I work as a director of engineering in a company called Toronto. All right, let's begin. When we are talking about consulting mindset, we do have to start with mindset itself. What is mindset? It's basically a established set of attitudes, right? So it's basically a person's way of viewing the entire world, his philosophy of life. You might have heard people say he's got a positive mindset or he's got a growth mindset. Exactly in the same parameter, when we are talking about consulting, the focus is towards the consulting. So when we're thinking of consulting mindset, we are saying this it's basically a way of thinking where we leverage the expertise and the experience to help solve problems with a focus on process then outcome. Now, the reason this mindset is a little hard to adopt is because most of us have spent more than a decade in school where we were told that this is a requirement and this is what you have to complete. So, like we were always taught the route from A to B, and we were not taught the idea of critical thinking where we were able to think of how instead of what. That was the focus on most of our education. We wanted to find out what, which was the answer, not how we are getting to the answer. And that probably is something that you need to inculcate if you're trying to become a better consultant. So uh, before we start talking about what a consultant does, what are some of the tools that the consultant can use, we'll talk a little bit about the consulting approach that you could take, a little bit about the how consult analyzes stuff. Let's actually spend a minute talking about what are actually the tasks that a consultant does, right? So a consultant basically gathers information, he effectively diagnoses a problem. He recommends actions, he implements changes, builds consensus and commitment, facilitates clients' learning, and most importantly, provide value. Now, value is a subtopic in itself. I'm not going to dig deep into all of these points because most of these points, I'm pretty sure you would be very, comfortable in understanding. But I do want to focus on a couple of them, like for example, value, which we'll be talking about in a minute or so. Understand that a consultant would first look at how a problem is presented to him. Like, for example, if a company comes to you as a consultant and says, "Hey, I want to improve my processes," that problem statement needs to be broken down and to be understood. What does that company actually require, right? And then we'll talk about how will that problem be solved. So when the problem statement comes in, the first thing that you have to do is to gather information. That means you have in that specific scenario, what do you mean by improve your process? Do you want your process, let's say, to be less expensive? Do you want your process to have lesser contribution from external stakeholders? Do you want to have a process which is less expensive, maybe? What do you mean by improving your process? So start by asking those correct questions and gathering that information. Once you've done that, then diagnose whatever is the problem. Don't jump to solutions yet, right? That's a very critical thing that a consultant has to keep in mind always. Whenever also when you're recommending actions, make sure that you are the person who's driving that change forward. You just don't recommend something and move out of the system. You have to build a consensus within the team members of the participating change and help. your clients whenever there's a aspect of learning as well. So only then you can, start uh, moving to become a better consultant. So again, we keep saying the word consultant, task, and consultant. What does a consultant actually do? So consultant basically does these three things. Is again something that, from what I've read, from what I believe, what I've worked on as well. So he's a consultant should be very vocal about the identified problems. A consultant should help cook efficient practices, and a consultant should focus on delighting the customers. Now, these three look like very jargonish kind of a statements, right? So I've tried to break it down in terms of how it would work out in an Atlassian ecosystem. When I say a consultant has to be vocal, that means a consultant should raise an alarm if they see a potential red flag, like there are too many custom fields in an instance. Just for example, right? When we are saying that you have to make the processes simpler, you can think about maybe the workflows that are there in your issue types are too complicated. There are too many automations. There are too many push functions. There are too many steps simply that is putting, a lot of weight on your system that you want to reduce. So something on those lines. When we talk about delighting the customers, right? So an engineer basically builds a solution, but a consultant will help the customer understand how to use that solution effectively. So start thinking from that perspective of not just creating a way to solve a problem, but actually guiding your team members or guiding your customers to travel through that way to reach at that solution as well. Now, when we are talking about consulting, there are some consulting approaches as well, how you approach a problem, right? Most important of that being when you're trying to approach, consulting, your biggest focus should be do not focus on solution directly, right? You have a problem. We've talked about this like a couple of minutes ago. You have a problem, create a hypothesis, do your analysis and your research, and then provide recommendations. Make sure when you're working through your problem statement, right, you're working with your client. Remember in a couple of slides ago, we were talking about the consultant tasks. We have to make sure that you're gathering the right amount of information that you need, right? So again, so let me break this down into a simpler steps in simpler parameters as well. So what's stopping the customer to deliver the work the way they want, right? So when we are talking about how to define your problem, that's what I mean by how you can define your problem, right? How can you solve that specific problem? That's when you're trying to understand of ways or to create an hypothesis how you can solve that specific problem. Then what are the repercussions of implementing the said solution? Be thorough in making sure the solution that you're recommending is not hampering something that is already working, right? So you don't want to solve one problem and create 10 other for your customers. You have to make sure that the solution that you're recommending is not just solving the problem, but not creating any more problems for some other team members or some other people as well. Is there an alternate workaround? You don't have to always uh, provide just a solution. There can be ways in which there could be alternate workarounds, right? Like again, let's talk about in terms of how it works in the Atlassian ecosystem. So if some customer comes to you and says, hey, can you build this X automation for me where every time I have a new team member joining in, they should get an access of Jira software, build a entire add-on on top of this existing solution that I have in data center for me. You have to find what the problem is. You have to provide hypothesis, understand how you can solve the problem, do your analysis and research. And if you've done that, and at a later in the process, you identify that, hey, there's an add-on that is already present in the marketplace that can do it. So rather than building in your data center environment, maybe you can use this add-on, or maybe Atlassian already has an offering in terms of a product which can do that, right? So think on those lines as well. One of those ways in which you can start thinking about those is a tool called idea tree, right? I've tried to compress a lot of information in this next two slides, but idea tree is a very vast topic. I would encourage you guys to go back and check whatever idea tree is, how you can use it. Just look at the example that I've taken from on the left hand side. So, like, if the problem statement is how can the art center increase revenues, right? So there could be three possible solutions. Each solution could then possibly have more interpretations or more ways of solving that problem. Like maybe changing the pricing is a way, maybe getting more people to attend the art center is a way, or maybe identifying alternate revenue streams is a way, right? Once you'll be, when you're gathering information, when you're working with your team members, you understand pricing change is not possible, right? So we cannot do that, and we cannot change the nature of collection of how we are attending, how those attendees are providing the money as well. So then maybe in that scenario, the only possible or the logical outcome is to explore alternate marketing channels to broaden audience so that they come and see the art center, right? And it can further break down into more steps, and then you can have more steps and then work with your team members to identify that. Also, again, so I could have done it like in two more steps, but I didn't want to cram a lot of information on the slides. Recommend going back to idea tree and checking that out. So that definitely is a very good way. uh, the next thing that I wanted to talk to you was about analysis. So we've seen the word analysis pop up at multiple places, saying that how can you do analysis, right? You can gather information and then you have to do analysis, but how can you do the analysis? So the first step of doing your analysis is to define the problem space. What is the problem that you have? What is it that you're trying to solve? Understand the context and the situation. Why is this issue at this point of time hurting the customer? Are there other issues which is bearing on that problem, right? Understand the context. Then understand the constraints or the complications. What is not in scope as well? What solutions are not acceptable? You don't want to build a solution where, like for example, the example that we were just talking about, maybe not some GDPR guidelines, or maybe something around you know month end or year end fiscal cycle, which is restricting the company to buy an add-on. Just a random observation, but something of that nature, which is restricting that specific solution. So understand that when you're trying to recommend something to your customer. Most importantly, who is the client, right? Who are you making the presentation for? Who are you presenting the solution for? And once you identify that, convert your presentation to suit their line of thinking. So make sure that they are able to understand what you're trying to sell. You don't want to speak in a language which is too technical for a director or a VP level person. And you don't want to talk just about business values and pillars and outcomes to an engineer, right? Who is your audience that you're talking to? So make sure that you are able to take that into consideration. And another important thing, which is again added on to understanding who is the client, is who will take the decision. Is there a person or a group of people who are going to get together and define whether the solution that you have presented is worthy enough to move forward and to be implemented? Because every change comes with a cost. So the change that you're recommending, would that be worthy? So the people who are actually going to approve it or reject it, the people who are the decision makers, take those people into consideration when you're making those decisions. Moving on to something which is a very, very important slide, I would say. So what are the consulting skills that we talk about, right? So for consultant has skills, right? As we've talked about the first one when we were just starting to talk about how uh, consulting mindset is a little harder for us to grab onto, because creative thinking and critical thinking is something that is not encouraged a lot in the education system that we grew up in, right? But that is something that you can inculcate yourself, right? You can start looking, the famous jargon, right? Think outside the box. Try to embrace it, right? How can you think outside the box? You can actually start looking at problems from multiple perspectives. When you're, I think, most important in this is the 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 attitude in which you'll work with your customers, trying to empathize with the problem that your customer is having, to understand the problems that they are facing, can have multiple areas of uh, disturbance for that specific client as well, right? Thinking conceptually and practically. So you, while you're thinking out of the box, you don't have to let go of what is practical and what is conceptual as well. You have to make sure that you're, at the end of the day, being a person who is solving problems, right? The most important that I feel, and I think there's a there's a consulting asset slide after this as well, which I summarize, where I specifically focus on this point, which is communication. So you have to make sure that you're communicating very clearly and empathetically with your customers. You're able to collaborate with people at all job levels, because as a consultant, as I was saying earlier, you'll be working with directors, you'll be working with engineers on the ground level. So you have to make sure that you are empathetically, collaborating with all of those people and getting the perspective, the combined perspective of all of those people to understand that. Of course, you have to have a very good time management skills for that. There are many tools out in the market. You can leverage add-ons from the Atlassian marketplace. You can use free tools as well. Personally, I use Trello. I do use Jira and Confluence as well for a lot of organizing my work. But Trello tops that list because I use it at a lot of personal, tasks that I have as well. I would encourage you to check it out if that's not something that you already use. You also have to be curious, right? So the learning mindset, or the inquisitive nature of being a consultant, helps you to be a better person in your role if you are curious. Because if you are trying to actually look for solutions and not just trying to solve the customer's problem for your own learning as well, that definitely helps. And make sure that the credibility that you're building, right? So the solutions that you're offering are credible. At the 12th hour, it should not break down. The recommendations that you've made should not be something that could not stand the test of time. You don't want to be at a place where your value as a consultant is not uh, you know not enough for the decision makers to put a bet on you and move forward. Coming back to something which I was saying earlier, that we've been saying the word value. So what is value? I feel, and I've taken this quote from another website, which said value is just like beauty. It's actually in the eyes of the beholder, right? So when you say this provides value, who that person is who's saying at that point of time matters a lot, right? So a roadmap might not add a value to an engineer, but a roadmap is all probably what a senior executive is looking for. A timesheet gadget, which provides a project manager with the option of viewing where his team is working, might not be valuable enough for another, uh, senior leadership. Or a simple gadget in Jira which says, "Hey, show me all the issues that I have." How value is perceived is dependent on who is seeing it. So keep that in mind when you're trying to deliver value, because the value, the term itself, and in the context of the project, is a very personal thing, right? You'll have to understand that, and it'll definitely be easier as you work your way through the consulting engagements. Your experience will grow. You'll understand how can you, you quantify that specific item to say that if this is providing value to this subset of people, and if it is providing value to another subset of people. So that is something that definitely you have to, I would recommend to keep in mind. My last slide is around the consulting assets. As I said, communication is at the center of it. Make sure you're improving your, uh, effective questions asking, right? So it's a skill. What you are trying to gather information on can only be achieved 100% if you are asking the right questions. If you are asking the right questions from your customers, from your team members, you'll get the right responses, which will help you build the right strategy to move forward. And of course, it's very important that uh, you always have the desire to learn more, right? You cannot at any point in time be stagnant and not continue learning, because at that point of time, because the market is changing so rapidly, your skill set, or your the tools which are in the market, for example, or the methodologies that are out there for project management, you want to always continue learning. You want to always broaden your horizons, because it will keep on giving you more perspective, and at the end of the day, that helps a lot in becoming a better consultant. With that, I'm going to take a pause. If you have any questions, this is my email address. You can reach out to me at sajid.n@trundle.com. I'll be available at the after party. Thank you, and I hope that you have a good journey towards becoming a better consultant. Have a good day.